All right, everyone, welcome to the next episode. I think it's 325 of Stu and the Nun. And as you see, I got Nun here. We got Toby back in the house from our super southern studio in Mexico. And of course, me in the northern studio here. And so glad to be back. Took a little break around Christmas time, which we all do, to enjoy time with family and friends and maybe alleviating some of the deer population of Western New York and doing all that good stuff. I had this guest. We have a very special guest tonight. We're going to call him Frost. Frost, I was going to have him on right before the week before Christmas. I came down a little ill and was not feeling good that night, so I waved it off. And so I make sure we gave Frost the respect he deserves. So we're covering a lot of great information tonight. So this is kind of a pick back up rescheduling of that, and luckily we're able to have Toby with us too. Toby, how you doing, brother?
Good, my man, and welcome 2024 Venti Quattro. Already starting off with the bang, we're down here catching fish, making money, not getting arrested, and here I am doing a podcast with you. How awesome is that? Like,
first show of the year. First show of the year.
Starting off with a big bang. Maybe that means we kind of hinted I'm getting back in the saddle a little bit more. While we do have our little show down here that's like fishing and culturally related, this is the real house. This is the home, right? So it's good to be back with mi hermano.
Yes, absolutely. And 2024, anyone that's watched your show for a while knows, politics is a big part of our show, and through the Trump years and then the initial Biden years, there was so much content all the time. Well, we are back in an election year.
Well, we started doing politics in the Obama years.
We did we did. Like, but it was lively in the Trump years.
Yeah.
No, we are back, so I'm hoping you're able to be on a lot more, because I think just like our years past, we just have to wait till the day of the show, and there's no shortage of content, and I think it's already going to be that way as we see things happen. But we're not talking politics tonight per se, but we are definitely going to talk about a topic that is huge to our domestic policy. And we're going to talk about that after we thank our sponsors that we have. Alpha Elite Performance. I just ordered me some new stuff from there. Just got, I got some new pre-workout. I got some new GBNT sleep. I got a couple new things. Put a nice big order in around Christmas. Of course, boohammer.com. Gear for Grunts. Got my Gear for Grunts shirt on. Of course, you're representing Cabo Red Rum Sport Fishing for all your best sport fishing needs. The best charter sport fishing business is south of the border. If I could say that, So want to thank all that and our sponsors. But I'm gonna look at some technical stuff here. But anyways, without that, Frost, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. Glad to be on this. There's a lot going on in the country, and can't wait to get into some good conversation about what's happening in the country, kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, let's get on it. So I'm going to let you divulge what you want to divulge as far as I'll just say you're a government employee, and you work with that and you have firsthand knowledge of what's like happening at the border. So I want to kind of just hit on and talk about, obviously everyone is seeing everything about the southern border, and what's going on there. And obviously we see a lot of stuff in the news, and it's pretty dismal. I mean, there's just, you see just thousands of people every day. You hear we've heard so much about the human trafficking, the rapes, all the terrible crimes, to the degree that they don't even talk about it anymore. That's just considered like a byproduct. But we saw the accusations and of what the agents were doing on the horses and all that stuff. But Toby and I both know, and just as you do, and many people that have been getting around this kind of stuff, like what the news covers is not even close to really what's happening. And I'm hoping you can kind of put some light on that tonight.
Yeah, so that's correct. So like you said, I do work for the government, and I'm kind of in this position right now where, as a government employee, I also help out with a lot of state level politics and immigration and just criminal stuff happening, within the state. So I kind of have a dual approach to it, a dual look at it, I guess, from the federal immigration side of things, and also from the state level and how immigration is impacting the state. So starting off at the border, I mean, right, like you said, we've all seen the news coverage. It's atrocious. The numbers are just astronomical, and the news likes to talk about these gotaways. And I've seen it firsthand, these gotaways. I mean, those numbers are super deflated that the news is talking about, because realistically, we have no idea how many gotaways there actually is. What I could tell you is, and I'll urge your listeners to do this, is go to your local Department of Homeland Security office, for example, and just any day of the week, and just look at the thousands of people lined up. It's getting to the point it's just unsustainable. Really, the problem that we've experienced with immigration is, the immigration system is broken essentially, and things were definitely better under Trump. The Remain in Mexico policy was a fantastic policy that really spearheaded immigration at the border. Once that was taken away by Biden, it got to the point it was just unsustainable. So essentially the problem now is, and no one's talking about this, the problem now is, and I'll just break down the basic immigration process just so your listeners could understand what I'm talking about. So, when you go through immigration, you either if you come into the country illegally and you get arrested, what happens is you got to go in front of an immigration judge. And because nobody coming into the country at this point is detained, they're all detained for maybe a day and then they're released. It's called an OREX, or release on their own recognizance. And essentially, wherever they want to go to, they go, right? Whether it's New York or California, Texas, they go to that state. They're supposed to report to their local Department of Homeland Security office at a given date and time. Unfortunately, that's not happening in majority of the cases. If they were following the correct path to the immigration process, eventually they would be given what's called an NTA, a notice to appear. That would be their charging document, almost like if you were arrested, as your arrest affidavit that gets you in front of a judge to let him hear your case. The problem is nobody's doing that. So essentially, if we fast forward this immigration process 3-4 years down the line, these people don't show up for court. So what happens is they get what's called a final order of removal in absentia. So that means, hey, we're going to order them. A judge is going to order them deported, but there's a little clause in there saying it's an absentia, meaning, well, they were never physically present to fight their case. And on the immigration side of the house, what that does is an automatic reopening of their case. So as much as I love, President Trump, and he's saying we're going to, remove people that need to get removed from the country, the fact of the matter is our immigration system is so backlogged, it probably is gonna take 10 to 15 years to actually get even half of the people that came into the country removed. Um, it's just really unsustainable at this point.
Toby, you got something?
Yeah,
Look, I see it in your face. I'm about to go. Like Toby's queued up.
I got a lot of things. So I'm gonna come at this from my very own personal perspective. Frosto, like as you might know, I am an immigrant going through the immigration process actively, and I am well versed at its challenges and the speed at which it does not operate. Now, I want to like kind of ask a couple of questions, I want to ask it because you've kind of framed some things. You talked about the Remain in Mexico policy. You talked about the previous administration. You've talked about the current administration, and what I'm curious about, which I think a lot of people are, because this is something that's really hard to grasp and understand, and perhaps you can shed some light on it. So when one person changes, right? So the president of the United States, the person that conceptualizes the policy, or is the vision caster of the policy. When that one person changes, how does it have such a dramatic and direct effect? So obviously we know that that one person then appoints somebody. And in this case, I'm going to use the Department of Homeland Security as the example. And in DHS, they appoint the cabinet appointee for that position was Mr. Mayorkas. And now with the change of one person, how much staff does this one person get to bring on board? Because as a common American, as a common, hopefully a citizen someday, person looks at this objectively and critically thinks it through, the rank and file should be the same, right? How is it that in leadership there's been such a dramatic swing? How is that possible? And how is the culture changed so dramatically by such a change in few people?
Right. So good question. And I'll tell you, the government is very much just like the military, right? Unfortunately, even in the military, and I experienced this as well, you have senior level leadership that could literally dictate almost whatever policies or procedures they want, within a general scope of their practice. So they can make a lot of changes, right? Either good or bad. Um, Unfortunately, the leadership underneath, right, the junior level leadership, and this is the case, especially in the government, from what I've seen, is a lot of people are just looking for their next promotion. So at the end of the day, and that's the same thing with Secretary Mayorkas. At the end of the day, he's put in that position to play whatever role the president wants him to play, whether that means that he's going to enforce immigration laws or not enforce immigration laws. And right, and that's how he gets his next promotion or his bonuses. And unfortunately, that even goes to the point of um, essentially them breaking immigration law, right, constitutional law in the country. Um, but if that's what they're instructed to do from above, that's what's being done. And and I've seen it firsthand is with these changes of administration, the changes in ultimate like staff across the board happens, right? So um, people who are staffers within DHS under President Trump, if they held strong political viewpoints or they made accusations or made statements, that went against President Trump, then, or even President Biden for that matter, those people got reappointed to other positions where they had zero influence in whatever immigration policies or whatever policies they wanted to push whatsoever.
So they reassign them. They just like, hey, we need you in the California desert now. You're going to be go over
Well,
here.
essentially,
Trying to
right? Because I mean, all government employees, for the most part, have a mobility agreement, right? So if you get to
Right.
the point, and that's the thing with being a government employee, also is, again, like you're in the military, is you serve in the military, you don't really have a voice on what's going on. Sure, you could have an
Right.
opinion
So,
as a person, but as a government employee, no, you cannot have a political position.
so it's funny you bring this up because I was leading you down this garden path, and look at you, you bit. Yeah. So in the military, you cannot be an activist.
Correct.
And like in my time in the military, I did see an activist or two or five. We saw the people that, WikiLeaks. We saw, I'm going to become a conscientious objector. Like we saw activism at a very small way, and it got handled because of this weird thing called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's pretty unforgiving.
Right.
But what we're seeing, and I'm gonna pull an anecdote right out of recent hearings where the leader of Homeland Security was questioned about the activism of employees. In fact, I'm going to speak specifically about someone that was in charge of granting asylum, making, commentary and tweets about Hamas and, their attack on Israel. And so, like, we're seeing like severe activism within staff of a department that is not held to account. Now, is that because and so you said the previous administration, if you said something that was adverse to that policy or adverse to him, you found yourself on the Greenland, airport station. And now, like, if you say something against Biden, you're looking at, I don't know, what's a bad play? Oh, they send you to Texas.
Right. And unfortunately, I know the exact case you're talking about. And it's one of these things where, unfortunately, just at this point, the government just seems very politically charged. And if you don't have the same beliefs as them, essentially, you could find yourself in a bad place. Now, with her specifically, and this kind of leads into what I was going to talk about next, is correct. So she was an asylum officer with USCIS, is probably the agency that you're going through for your citizenship status. Um, and she really has direct authority in that position to grant citizenship almost universally to whoever she wants to. And, I just, with that circumstance and with Secretary Mayorkas really not having a strong opinion on it, it was really distasteful because, but again, she was following a lot of the talking points that more the left-wing media has talked about, right? And almost what the U.S. government, especially DHS, in recent years has been following. It's that left-wing agenda where she's going to sit there and talk badly about Israel and not condemn Hamas and talk about how Hamas are great people. And I don't really know what happened to her, to be honest with you. But unfortunately, it's just the whole government is very politicized. That's why a lot of people, if you don't hold the same opinions as the current political office, everyone kind of just shuts their mouth because they know that the writing's on the wall if they speak out about it. So what I was going to say about asylum is, as you mentioned, the asylum officer, that's another process right now that's broken because of the Southwest border. So typically, and I don't know the actual statistics behind asylum cases, but I'll tell you, they've never been to the point they are now. So a lot of these, immigrants come into the country, they're involved in some type of network that they get information, right? They know what to say when they come across the border. They know the entire process before they get here. The asylum numbers now are astronomical. For a long time, there were certain threshold and criteria you had to meet just to file for asylum. So you had to meet a certain threshold, and that threshold is essentially fear of prosecution or torture from your government. And that's been the threshold forever. That threshold now has gone out the window. I mean, people could file for asylum literally for whatever reasons they want to. And this is something that, again, the asylum process, I mean, it's been backlogged since President Trump. So, I mean, there is hundreds of thousands of people filing for asylum. The problem with it is once you file for asylum with DHS, you're essentially untouchable. So whatever master list you're on, right, to report to an office or to follow your immigration steps while you're in this unknown status, go away. You no longer have to report. You automatically get a work authorization and a social security number, and you're eligible to work and be a U.S. citizen while your asylum claim is being processed. Now, again, because of the backlog, most of these people are probably going to be here for the next 7 to 10 years before their asylum claim actually gets adjudicated and looked at by an officer.
So 7 to 10 years, they're going to have the SOCH, they're going to have a work permit, they're going to be able to just get into the system and
Correct.
For 7 to 10 years, they have a SOCH.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
They're going to get one. No, they have it. They
right. That's
Yeah, so
that's crazy.
You have that.
Right.
You have everything.
So once they file for asylum,
once you have that, you're good.
Yeah, once they file for asylum, they then fall off every master list. No one's tracking them, and they do get the social security number and they get a work authorization,
And
along with government benefits if requested.
Well, and depending on what state they're in, state benefits, right? Free healthcare, free
Correct.
college. If they you see them, Fox News is down there all the time. They're the only one that are at the border talking to people, and they're always asking these folks from all different countries, where do you want to go? And it's like Florida, New York, California, Chicago. Like that's most of them. These aren't people getting put on the buses. That's where they plan to go, and most of them are California and Florida. I mean, obviously, no one wants to come to Buffalo in January from Mexico or Africa, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually, it's funny, a lot of people were going to New York City for a very long time, and because New York City now, I mean, the living conditions there for, migrants they're atrocious. There's been reports of migrants in New York City actually asking to go back to their countries, voluntarily leaving the U.S. to go back to their countries. They're living worse in New York City than they were in whatever country, they came from.
They interviewed folks that wanted to get out of Chicago and go back to Venezuela. They said it was better because they were promised all these things, right? You're going to go up and get a job and get this, and they get up here. And you mentioned New York City, right? This weekend, they're calling for the first big storm in a couple of years to hit New York City, upwards of 2 feet of snow. Most of those people that cannot get into the hotels that Mayor Adams has set up are sleeping behind barricades on the street, on the sidewalks. They're about to get hit 2 foot of snow. It's gonna wash a lot of that away. I don't know where they're going, but I guarantee they won't be staying there.
Yeah, it's unsustainable. And as far as like the whole asylum process, I mean, like again, these people, I mean, most of these people are going to be here for a substantial amount of time. And like I said earlier that I have this particular job as I assist with the locals in the state. So I'll just talk about that quick. So, I pretty much assist locals identify, people who are in the country illegally, and kind of do a lot with criminal aspect as well as immigration. So what I've seen in the last 6 months is astounding. And this is stuff that, the locals would know and the state government, but, Fox News hasn't talked about it. There's been a major uptick in crimes, just basic, crimes here in the U.S. by migrants. And when I'm talking about crimes, like DUI numbers are off the charts, right? It's unbelievable. But the crimes that, you and we all care about are the violent crimes. And I can't even begin to list to you the number of homicide investigations, rape investigations, child molestation investigations, sexual assaults. They are astronomical. And one of the most upsetting things is the immigration process at the border is it's just so distraught down there that, I mean, Border Patrol especially is severely overworked. Um, so they have ways to expedite their process, which gets individuals out of custody faster, if you will. And that's been a big push of the Biden administration, is time in custody, right? Because, I mean, common sense will tell you, when you have individuals in custody, that's when things could happen, right? Like, having a death in custody is the worst PR nightmare you could imagine. So one of the big things of the Biden administration was, listen, let's process these people. Let's kind of find out some basic information from them, and let's get them out of there. So if something happens, at least they're not physically, in custody when it happens.
Not on my watch, kind of thing. Not like that kid did not
Exactly.
die in our. He may have died when he walked out the front gate, but that little kid didn't die sleeping on the floor
So,
here.
Correct.
Frost, if I might just ask something quickly. So with this uptick in crime and violent crimes specifically, are we being misled? And what I mean by, because my understanding is, the people that are crossing the border, are these innocent, youthful, hard done by, folks. Like, are we talked about the kids in the cages. We're talking about like all these things, these great talking points, and like we need to do better, and this is why we're pushing people through detainment quickly, so like we don't have these like deaths while detained and stuff like that, but also because they're kids. Are the whole unaccompanied minor talking point. Is it kids that are going out and doing these? And I know I'm sound like a smart ass, but like I'm seriously asking. The picture that's being painted from my perspective is that we don't have a bunch of military-aged males hitting the streets with violent intent. What we have is like women and children. Is that not the case?
So I've been doing this for quite a bit, and I can tell you, there has been a big shift in immigration. I mean, you've always had, right, your family units and your men and women and with kids. What I've seen in the last 3 years primarily is, I hate to even say the terminology, but military age male, right?
Well, that's I used to.
Your 16 to 25 year olds. That's majority of what it is. Now you obviously get family units and you get women with children, but really in the last year has been a big swing towards more that military age male generality. So
I mean, I came here as a military-age male, and then I joined the military. So,
right.
like, yeah.
Well, listen, that's
Like, I
always
don't
an
think that's
option.
that offensive to say, but like, it's a demographic, right?
Well, it's the problem that, so what I didn't say and what I'm going to say now is the fact that, right, you came from Canada, right? A lot of these military age males, it what kind of puts the hair on the back of our necks up, right, that work in the government, is when you see people coming from Uzbekistan, from Mali, Africa, from Yemen, from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from countries that have really high thresholds of known terrorism. That's kind of where it comes into play of saying, well, who are these people? And the problem is, at the border, a lot of these people have passports or have identification cards from their countries of birth. What they do is they chuck them in the water before they cross the border, right? So how that essentially works is, if they've never been to the US, if they've never been encountered by the US government, they can come over here and say their name is, whatever it is, right? Make up a fake name, fake alias, and a fake date of birth. We're going to plug them into the system that way. And then what happens is, sure, we're going to take their fingerprints, right? But again, if they have no FBI or any government or local interactions in the U.S., we have no idea who that person is. So this is really something that, since this immigration crisis has been going on for the last couple of years, we're now seeing how it's affected the state side of criminal law. I've worked tons of cases where people came over, they gave a fake name, a fake date of birth, and they were plugged into the system as being that person. And then they get arrested for something from the locals, and I have no idea who they are. When the locals ask me, I'm like, I have no idea, right? I don't have that person that you arrested in my system. I have their alias, but there's nothing to tie those people, those alias, to the actual identity. So what they're doing is they come here and then they go to their consulate and they actually get a physical passport with their actual name, their actual date of birth. And that's their identification that they use in the US because that's their true identity. So when they get arrested from the locals for whatever crime, DHS has no idea who they are. I have no idea when he crossed, right? Because he's floating in some system under an alias.
They've got this figured out, or better yet, people are educating them, like you said, on how what they need to do, right?
I mean, there's a playbook, right?
There is,
yeah,
100%.
yeah. So I want to switch gears real quick. I mean, this is obviously we could spend hours just on this on the southern border, and everyone sees about that. But I really, really want to talk about this northern border. This is something that we talked about a while ago, and just right before we're going to have you on in December, it started to hit mainstream news on just how open, how much cheaper, and how much easier it is for people to cross over the northern border versus the southern border. And I think it has pretty much gotten nil to no coverage, and people are just ignorant of what's happening up there. Can you kind of cover a little bit about what's been going on there for a while?
Yeah, I can. So, Mr. Nunn there, right? If you drive the I-10 through Texas, you're going to encounter Border Patrol. I mean, there's ample amounts of Border Patrol
You do.
all over the place. That's
Even
such
Louisiana.
yeah, that's such a vast area. And it's unfortunate that the northern border, unfortunately, and I'll make up a number here, but it's probably going to be fairly accurate. I would say 75% of Border Patrol agents are at the southwest border, and you got the other, maybe 25% along the northern border. So it's a
Which
huge,
is how much bigger?
drastically. It's huge, and it's desolate, right? The northern
Right.
border, a lot of it's just desolate area. So kind of what's been happening especially in the last year. So Canada came out, and they're very, very, very liberal as far as their immigration, priorities and such. So they actually gave free visas. Again, I think this started about 8 or 9 months ago. They give free visas to South and Central Americans. So generally what happens is South and Central Americans come through Mexico, right? They use the cartel and use coyotes to get them across, which is pretty expensive. I mean, from what I've heard in interviews, I mean, it's between $5,000 and $10,000 per person. Now with Canada opening up their immigration process to South and Central Americans, now they can get to Canada just by a flight. They don't have to get a visa there. So what Canada is also doing is Canada is allowing them to file for asylum right in Canada. And during that whole asylum process, they expedite it within 2 or 3 months. They're a lot quicker than the U.S. is on it. They give housing and food allowances and all these kind of things. So it's easier to get citizenship in Canada than it is to get citizenship in the US. So Canada, you can get it from distant relatives and all these kind of things. So as long as someone in your family line gets citizenship, it's very easy for another family member to get it, which is not the case in the US. Usually in the US, it's close, familiar ties and along those lines. So what's been happening is if an asylum claim goes south, like it looks like it's not going to happen, then people are literally just coming across the water and coming right into New York. So kind of it must be a network of some kind. But what they're doing, which is actually very problematic for New York's sake, is these migrants are coming from Canada and they're crossing into New York by the Adirondacks, but they're using the reservation almost as protection. So crossing into Indian reservations where nobody has authority. So I can't say that the Native Americans are assisting with the smuggling operations per se, but migrants are crossing into reservation property, which nobody has authority. So from then they could just generally go to New York City from what we've been seeing. but it's becoming a real crisis up there for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Now you're talking about just what's that, Toby?
It's a little ironic.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're just talking about New York, but let's talk about the cost. Now you said $5,000 to $10,000 to come across the southern border.
Correct.
What's a plane ticket from Mexico to Toronto, Montreal, anywhere, right? A few $100.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably
For one way.
From here, yeah, $300.
$300 one way, right? They get up there, they file for asylum, they get a phone and food and all that stuff. A lot of the stuff they get in the U.S., but they're going a lot quicker. Now, even if they don't do that, if they want to come right across, whatever border in northern New York and Adirondacks and get on, what's the cost to be shepherded across the border into the res? And does the res take a cut?
So from what I've been hearing from sources, so the cartel so there's a heavy cartel presence up in Toronto, Montreal, a lot of these big cities in Canada, and that's really transpired in the last couple of years. And so that's the thing, right? So the cost in the southwest border is significantly higher just because the mass quantity of people coming across. So they could take a group of 20, 30, 40, 50 people at a time and charge everyone $5,000 to $10,000 per person. Now, in Canada, from what I'm hearing, it's between $1,000 and $3,000 to come across. So it's significantly cheaper, especially if you're trying to cross an entire family unit. It's a lot cheaper. Now, it's also a lot more dangerous in New York because you're literally just in open waters as you're crossing. So there's a significant amount of deaths. Even a couple years ago, I don't know if you remember this in Buffalo, but there was like a group of migrants on a raft that ended up by like Strawberry Island, just floating around.
Yeah.
They just decided to make the leap by themselves with nobody. So yeah, it's becoming a real thing. It's very problematic.
It's so
just to give some numbers real quick, I got some stats here, right? For one thing, the northern border is 3 times the length of the southern border at over 5,000 miles long. But in 23, we had 3.2 million illegal aliens at all the borders, right? That's a 16% increase.
Right.
But the northern border alone in 23 had a little over 189,000 encounters, right? That's not counting the getaways.
Yes.
Right, up from 109,000. It jumped 80,000 in 23 of just the encounters, right?
Right, but so, I mean, so say we go with the iceberg, right? So we go with the iceberg. You see 10% of it,
right?
I mean, so like I'm just, you guys are talking about New York, and I'm kind of smiling because people have been smuggling things from Canada into the United States since Prohibition. But if
from Vancouver to
so what I'm saying is this is even easier and cheaper, right? So a Pacific port, right? Vancouver, you fly into Vancouver, you seek asylum, and then you're like, I'm not saying at a family member that used to move something from, British Columbia into Washington State, but like it was a pretty successful business, like
it didn't involve swimming.
It didn't involve swimming. In fact, it was involving recreational vehicles, and they had a lot of fun doing it.
But just think about the New York piece that they have the res being part of this.
Yeah, well, and there's reses there too, right?
True, right.
So there's a lot of them, some of the biggest, right? The when we start talking about like Washington State, Idaho, Montana, like there's some big reses there, and it's just wild to think that if you use 180, so we go 1.8 million people potentially have crossed through there undetected.
Right.
And that's not a crazy like conspiracy theory. That's not like, we're talking out our ass. Like if 25% of the force is watching 3 times the size, chances are
that means that tip of the iceberg may be not even 10%. That may be less.
And it's not like China, just to name a country, didn't move, or people fled China, by the hundreds of thousands to Vancouver, right? So when Hong Kong, the British lease on Hong Kong expired, there was a mass migration to the Vancouver area because it was a Pacific port. And, like there was organized movement to move people into Canada. Big freighters. I mean, like, so it's not like this has never been done before, and it's not like they can't be organized. And I'm not disrespecting Canadian law enforcement, but they, Mounties used to go out 2 by 2, like they were missionaries. They had to cover like hundreds of square miles of space. The Canadian Border Patrol has the same challenge. They got to cover 100 of miles of space. And, with the workforce, it's not very big.
Already. It's not that they're stretched thin. They're just not big anyways.
I mean, the population of Canada is less than the population of California. You could drop California and Canada, shake it up and lose it for a week. Like it's not. Anyway, sorry, Frost. Back to you.
No, it's fine. No, I understand what you're saying. I know right now specifically the areas that are getting hit, they're coming from Canada is like Toronto, Montreal. I don't know much about Western Canada, but from what I've heard, it's fairly desolate, is it not? Do you know? Like to get to the US?
Do know it's like I'm saying, like I'm not saying I had a family member that used to move something from.
Yeah, so that's why I don't even think that's utilized by any degree.
But it's interesting about the cartels have moved and set up shop, man.
Yeah,
I mean, an ATVs down power lines,
right?
Yeah, but I mean, hey, hey, Javier and Miguel, you're moving to you're setting up the Toronto branch. Like what? Bring jackets, and
they're really good, as far as knowing kind of what the policies in the U.S. are doing, right, and how to circumvent those policies. I mean, they know there's a heavy presence at the southwest border. So, I mean, as a business decision, I could say, they were like, hey, let's move into Canada, right? And let's start smuggling from there. And now essentially we're spread so thin that it's impossible to cover the entire southwest border and the entire northern border, let alone just the northeast border. It's physically impossible.
Now, so the good news is, well, it's not necessarily good news, but I would say, while there's probably a huge influx of people, and not necessarily the best of people, coming through Canada, we're not seeing the manufactured drugs like fentanyl having, they're not moving that from Mexico up there to bring down, are they? Right? I mean, that's just an additional step. That's, it's easier to move a human than drugs, right? That's why the cartels are like, they changed up their playbook and they're making a lot more money off of humans than they are off drugs.
So not necessarily. There has been a huge influx in fentanyl coming from Canada.
Interesting.
And again, I think it's, because, as a business, you expect, I don't know, just throw out numbers, right? 4/10 of every load you ship across the southwest border to get seized. Now, if you move that operation, you can get drugs via however they do it, right? Via boat or whatever, into Canada. Right, that number goes down drastically, right? So now you're talking about 1/10 of your loads get seized. So there has been a huge influx of fentanyl coming from Canada. That's Mexican fentanyl.
Yeah, it's maybe that's what's maybe NAFTA is that's a real example of it. I don't know, but it's it is so much attention's on the South. News, media, politicians, right? They were the 60 House Republicans were just down there yesterday, touring all over. But but when you look at the cities that that Abbott and DeSantis and them have been busing people to and flying people to, they're right there. They're Chicago. They're New York. If the cartels can get them to Canada, and it's not that long. It's 6 hours from the border, or north of Plattsburgh, between Plattsburgh and Montreal, down to New York City. On a good day, it's 6 hour drive. You know, we talked about, you know, the streets in New York City are full. The hotels are overflowing. They've shipped migrants out all over, including right near my house. They're all spread all over New York in hotels. They've been saying for a while that the few amount of buses that have been that the governors of New York or the Texas and Florida have sent up are nowhere near the number of people that are in the city. They are coming from somewhere else. There's a leak somewhere else, and that leak is not on a Greyhound bus. Right. It makes sense that they're coming across the northern border.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure. And you know, I know those during the springtime and the fall, or the summer, those numbers are definitely inflated.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure, you know, during the wintertime, and that's the one caveat about going through Canada is obviously wintertime is problematic right up north. So those numbers are going to slow down drastically over the winter. But nonetheless, it's, you know, you're right. All the coverage has been on the southern border, and there's not much talk about the northern border. Um, you know, a couple of things I just wanted to add real quick is, you know, there's a huge influx of the Romanians specifically that are coming into Canada. And I mean, you could pretty much pick up any police report from any jurisdiction throughout the country at this point. And you know, they're criminal syndicates, and what they do, they're going to Targets and Walmarts, and they steal all the baby food, all the baby formula. They're stealing it off the shelves, and they use little, you know, Ponzi schemes to do it, right? Money exchange schemes. There is billions of dollars of baby formula that has been stolen by these Romanian groups. What they do is they ship it off and sell it overseas for high dollar. It's becoming a real problem here in the U.S., and I've seen it literally almost on a daily basis. And the unfortunate thing is, you know, just because, like we talked about with priorities and procedures, you know, set forth by high-ranking government officials, even when these people are arrested, we cannot do anything with them. We can't keep them in custody, and we can't deport them because they have minor children. So that's another caveat to this whole immigration thing. Barring you having killed somebody, almost any other crime, you will not get arrested or deported for at this time.
Because if you have a minor child with you.
Correct.
That could or could not be yours.
That exactly. We have no DNA to prove it's their child at all. But that's kind of just the blanket statement that we've been given is, well, they said they have a minor child, or they said they're 4 weeks pregnant. We're not going to keep them in custody. And
because you couldn't tell in 4 weeks unless you did a medical exam, right? Drew blood.
And the last thing I kind of want to bring attention to, because as an American citizen in this country, it just really honestly pisses me off, is the fact that I have worked, unfortunately, a high number of cases where, you know, there was individuals here illegally that were involved in DUI manslaughter cases, or homicide cases, just really atrocious things. And we find out that they flee the country. That's the first thing they do, is they flee the country. So not only do they come here illegally, live on our system, right, that we pay taxes for, then they commit atrocious crimes and then flee back to their country for safety, so they can't, to avoid prosecution. And, you know, as you said, like someone being in law enforcement, there's almost nothing that pisses you off more, because, you know, God forbid, right, these people came in here, and again, I've met some great people, great migrants who are here and just want to become American citizens, right? I mean, obviously they are here. But it seems like the bad ones that are here for bad reasons are very, very bad. But that's the first thing they do, is they tuck their tail and run right back to their country.
You know, interesting fun fact. You talked about the baby formula. I'll kick it up a notch. I just recently had to go into Toronto, and I rented a car at the airport, and because I just want to take my truck. And the guy's like, hey, you can rent, you know, there's a sign up. You're going to Canada. You can't take, you know, SUVs or trucks or this or that. And I'm like, hey, what's up with that? I can rent whatever I want. He's like, no, we will not let those go up there. They will get stolen. And he explained to me that there's this racket, Nigerians actually, that are stealing anything like above $50,000 to $60,000. And every full size truck is that. All the big SUVs are that. They are stealing them so fast in Toronto. They said they are putting them on, they are leasing cargo ships, and they are shipping cargo ships full of stolen vehicles back to Africa. So they are stealing F-150s, Tahoes, Lexus, you name it, any kind of SUV, high-end vehicle or truck, they're being so stolen so fast, and at least in Toronto, that and they're putting. So they just busted a big racket. They busted a warehouse that had over $10 million of cars in it that they were getting ready to load onto a ship, and they are shipping them into Africa. So not much different than the baby formula we talked about, except that they're vehicles. So the rental car company's like, nope, our vehicles aren't going up there because they'll be snatched. They'll be
Yeah,
gone.
no,
So,
that's definitely a thing going on too. I've worked in the last couple months, several cases. High end, usually it's high end cars from what I'm seeing. So I know firsthand of a Lamborghini being stolen, a Ferrari, and a Bentley that were all taken within a couple weeks of each other, and never to be seen again.
yeah, they're not being stripped for parts.
They're not. Yeah, they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. They're being shipped on cargo
Not
ships.
a Honda.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's good. We got a few more minutes left before we got to wrap up here. But Frost, I mean, we've covered a lot. Let me just kind of I'll go to Toby first. Anything, Toby, we did not cover you want to ask real quick? There's
Yeah,
so much
man.
I know to cover in North and South.
So Frost, I'm going to ask you like the weird question, and that's just like, give us some hope, man. Tell us how we can be hopeful about the situation.
That's a deep pause there. I have to take. Really got to think about that one. It's again. It's unfortunate right now that we have immigration laws in place, right, to stop this kind of behavior, and the fact that they're blatantly being disregarded at this point. It's an atrocity for the whole country. I unfortunately
Frost, let me offer you a
ahead.
chance to redeem hope. If the administration changes with this year's election and someone new comes in that supports the values that we used to have, and is against all this, do you think we could see a change as quick as we've seen? As Toby started out with, talking about how so many people in the government factors have all swinging over and supporting this. Do we think we could see a swing back with new leadership?
I mean, I believe so. It's really not a hard concept to shut the border down, right, and just do the right thing. But that's step one, right? Shut down the border, and then let's deal with the situation that we currently have on hand, right? Let's figure out who the good people are in this country that are, law-abiding citizens and want to be here for the right reasons, right? That want to pay taxes and contribute to society, and then let's weed out the bad eggs, right? And unfortunately, it's not going to happen, God willing, until 2024. But yeah, that's our hope at this point.
Yeah. Okay. That seems like the one hope when you had such a long pause. I thought, well, maybe the hope, the good news we have is that the administration changes.
No, that is the hope, but that's a long time till 2024. So I'm very worried about what from now till then looks like.
I mean, we've seen, I don't understand how, criminal charges haven't been pressed against some of the leadership.
Well, they're talking about doing it next week,
like contempt of Congress, perjury.
Well, when those 60 House Republicans visited yesterday, they made claim they are planning to draft articles of impeachment against Mayorkas next week.
I mean, like, if something like that happened, maybe, because clearly, I'm, and this isn't a political statement, so like, don't read into this. It's very black and white for me, cut and dried. You do your job, keep your job. Don't do your job, lose your job. And like, this is an important job, and it's clearly not being done. Despite any of the cute videos at TSA counters, airports across the country, the job is not being done, and it's an abysmal failure. And I don't understand like how someone hasn't been held criminally held accountable, especially for the deliberately misleading and lying to Congress and to the American people, and criminal misconduct. So like, I would think that it would a change of leadership, would then, like you said, there's all these laws, they just need to be enforced. If there was someone willing to do it, I don't think that necessarily has to be a presidential change. I think it needs to be a cabinet change.
Yeah.
Right.
I wish I had the answers for that. I agree that at some point, people are going to be held criminally liable for some of these things that have happened in the country. And I'll leave on this note. We all seen Israel Hamas, right? That whole conflict over there, and our borders being wide open for the last 3 years. Everybody that knows anything knows that we're in a position right now that's scary in this country. And I'll say that, God forbid that we have another 9/11 type of situation in this country. There's people with blood on their hands in our government, and I believe that they should be held responsible for what's been happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's been a serious dereliction of duty. And but if I could hope for anything, that people would actually be held accountable for that and not turn into a political heyday. But I just don't have no confidence in that. We got a minute or two left. Frost, anything else you want to leave us with, good or bad news? Anything that you just want to leave our listeners with?
I would say that, we're in a rough time as a country altogether, right? Not just with the border and, just everything's tough right now. But there's a reason to be optimistic about the future. And I just want everyone to know that, federal law enforcement, regardless of what agency, and I get this a lot from locals, unfortunately, we're really bound to priorities and policies that are in place. So for us not essentially doing our jobs at some times, it's not because we don't want to, it's because we physically can't. We're instructed not to. So I just want people to know, we're not bad people. There's a reason that we can't do certain things right now. We're handcuffed as an agency, essentially, as a government, from the powers that be. So, but we're here, 2024. Let's see, right? We're praying for a change, and whatever that change is, we're here to make it happen, to make the country safer.
You hit on it, man. We're praying. That's all we can do, and put it at His feet to help get this country back to the God-fearing country it once was, with values and morals and beliefs. So, all right. With that, I will wrap it up before we go over time. Thank you so much, Frost, for coming on, man. We'd love to have you back on again. I know we could continue to talk for a week. There were so many things we didn't get into, but thank you so much for giving us some of your time. Everyone else, thank you for tuning in and listening. Great start to 2024. What an awesome guest. Got Toby back in the seat, and we look forward to everyone tuning in every week. Follow us on all the socials. We're on everything, and Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, we're there. Stay tuned in, like our page, and hopefully we'll see you all next week. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, sir.